Okay, we're at Go Math Lesson 10.3, and we're still talking about area. So up until this point, we've looked at area as it pertains to a parallelogram. Now, a parallelogram could be like this, or maybe like this. Doesn't really matter. So a parallelogram, two sets of parallel sides. Our rectangles have 90-degree angles, so we have some things that are kind of qualifying there. And the formula so far has been area equals length times width. Now, I use length times width. Technically, it is base times height, but we're going to keep it with length times width because it's a little less confusing when we move into things like trapezoids. So area equals length times width. Now, whatever that length and width are, I can help solve it. So, for example, if I had 8 and I have 5, and we'll call them feet, 8 feet by 5 feet, I write the formula. So many times, and even today, as I'm walking around helping students, they don't write the formula, they get it wrong, and then they go, well, how's it wrong? Write the formula. You will not make those easy mistakes, right? Area equals length times width. Let's go with 8 times 5. Area equals 8 times 5. SPEMDAS, substitute, then parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, in that order. I do one thing, and I rewrite my problem. That helps me keep everything simple. I understand that most of us can look at this and go, well, 8 times 5 is 40. I got it. But as we move forward, you're not going to be able to do that. So get in the habit now. 8 times 5, of course, our area equals 40. And we're in feet. That's our unit, and it's squared because area is square feet. It's 2 dimensions. If I were looking at this, that makes perfect sense. And it doesn't matter if I'm over here and I make my straight line up here. My height is always based off of a 90-degree angle because I eventually want to come back to this rectangle. And if I'm looking over here at this particular shape, and I cut this off, and I put it over here, you can see I'm actually back to a rectangle. That's why I use this 90-degree angle as my height. I'm going to leave that there. We'll come back to it in a second. So right now, if I took this object and I cut it in half, and I were to erase this half. Now, we do know now that I've created 2 congruent triangles, congruent being same size and shape. But I end up with 8 times 5. They're the same units, except I don't need length times width. I need half of that, which is why with a triangle, area equals 1/2 base times height, or length times width. And I'm going to erase this just for the sake of showing us 1/2 of my rectangle. Okay, so we have one formula that we can use to solve everything. Now, plug it back in. Area equals 1/2 times 8 times 5. Because if I have a number next to a variable, that's a coefficient that means multiply. Area equals 4. Half times 8 is 4 times 5. Area equals 20 feet squared. And you look, and yes, 20 is half of 40. So I've been able to solve it in this way. If I were to look up here, though, and I were to cut this in half, I end up with this shape. This is not a right triangle. Again, I want to make sure that my length and my width, or my base and my height, are based off of the 2 lines that touch my right triangle. Because if I go opposite of that, I actually get the horizontal, and that's called a hypotenuse. So we're going to get to that in a little bit later. But I don't have this nice right triangle, so I need to go ahead and draw it. Just like up here, you can see I've drawn that shape. Because if I cut this off and I moved it over here, I could get back to my triangle, just like we've done up here. Formula stays the same. So start with the formula, start with the formula. Start with the formula, start with the formula, and then plug in what you know. Well, if I know that the area equals 40, and I know that my height is 4 inches and my base is 10 inches. Oops, sorry. Got to do this the right way. And let's go with the length down here, right? Area equals 40. So area equals 1/2 length times width. Start with the formula. Start with the formula. My area equals 40. So I had a student ask me today, Mr. W, what happens if they give me the area but they don't give me the 2 measurements? You solve it the same way we did in our last unit, where we're finding a missing variable. Area equals 1/2 of some number times 4. So let's do 1/2 times 4 times some number. because I can mix these up. This is associative and commutative properties of multiplication. So I get 40 equals 2 times some number. Well, instead of multiplying by 2, I find the inverse, which is divided by 2, and I get 20. The length is 20 equals 20. So let's go back and let's check our work, right? Area equals 1/2 times 20 times 4. If my area is 40, is that equal to half of 20, which is 10, times 4? 40 equals 40, and that is correct. Okay, I've verified it. So let's go ahead and just look at 2 in your book here. First one, find the area of the triangle. I'm going to scoot it up so we can see it a little bit better. I know that my formula is area equals 1/2 length times width or base times height. You can use either. They're going to repeatedly refer to it as base times height, but I want to keep it simple and just have one formula we need to know. So I get area equals 1/2 times 190 times 79. Area equals, so many people forget the 1/2 because they don't write out the formula. 1/2 of 190, I happen to know that, that's 95 times 79. If you didn't know that, you could use a calculator, you can write it out. Over here, I'm going to go, okay, 95 times 79. I don't know off the top of my head, so let's find out. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 9 plus 4 is 85. I have my 0. 5, 3, 7 times 9 is 63, plus 3 is 66. 5, 0, 1, 15, 7, and I get area equals 7,505 feet squared. So start with the formula and plug in what you know. Whether it is decimals, whether it is fractions, whether it is whole numbers, I can do it with any of those things because we've already solved them back in Unit 2 and Unit 4. So we really need to stop and evaluate, do I understand those concepts? And if not, we need to go back and hit them. Now, I have a pennant here, and Daniela is decorating her triangular pennant, and the area of the pennant is 225 inches squared. The base measures 30 inches. What is the height? So I take a look at what I know. Start with the formula. Start with the formula. Start with the formula. Area equals 1/2 times base times height, or I'm going to use length times width in this case. And I know that the area is 225 inches squared, and that's 1/2 times 30 times some number I don't know yet. So I get 225 equals 1/2 of 30 is 15 times some number. Now, instead of multiplying by 15, I do the inverse and divide, and I get 225 divided by 15. 225 divided by 15. All right, so 15 goes into 22 one time, and I'm left with 7, and I bring down the 5. 15 goes into 75 5 times. 15 times 5, 75. So my missing number is W, or my height in this case, equals 15. And all I'd have to do is go back and solve it. So I look at 1/2 times 30, which is 15. Is 15 times 15 equal 225? Check it in a calculator, and it sure does. Okay, so start with the formula, plug in what you know, and then solve for the missing variable, whether that's the whole area or just one of the pieces.